everyone. Happy Monday. Can you believe there's controversy surrounding the new administration already? You're watching Techstrong, gang. Hi, everyone. Happy Monday. It's Alan Schimmel for Techstrong, and you're watching Techstrong, gang. We've got a full usual gang lineup and some, as usual, 3 different segments here on Techstrong, gang. We're doing something a little different. I don't know how you're watching it, where you're watching it, when you're watching it, but we're dividing up the segments so that if you don't have time to watch the whole 40 or 45-minute show, you can grab just the individual segments up on Techstrong TV and soon on our OTT app. So, however you want to consume the gang, we'll try to make it consumable. Let me introduce you to who we have kicking off this wonderful week on the gang with us. I think first we're going to go out to sea and grab our cybersecurity expert, as well as nautical admiral, Chris Pirate, resident pirate. That's a good word for him. One and only Chris Blask. Chris, I know it's cold out on the seas today. I hope you're staying warm.
We're doing good. My wife Donna is with me. We've sailed down from Melbourne, Florida. We're down in Riviera Beach in Palm Beach County, and about 3 days sail from you in Boca Raton.
Well, I'm looking, hopefully it'll warm up by then. My boat's going in on the 28th, so try to get here before then if you could.
I'm working on it.
All right. It's going in for its annual physical, I guess. But Chris, thanks for joining us. Let me next go out to Colorado, where one of our studies, future VP analyst Mitch Ashley is hunkered down. Hey, Mitch, how are you, man?
I'm doing well. I'm a little landlocked, so I can't volunteer to be on Chris's boat, ship, whatever you call it. But I'm there with you in spirit, Chris. Hang tight.
All right. Now you're kind of landlocked there for sure. Next, let's go from Colorado to the mountains of New Mexico for our friend Tracy Ragan, CEO of Deploy Hub, CD Foundation. Is it TAC leader, or I don't even know
I'm
the
a busy
title.
girl.
You are one busy girl, always. Hey,
Yes.
Tracy, how are you?
I'm fine. We are starting to warm up here after last week being absolutely freezing. And yes, I'm on the board of the Technology Oversight Committee at the CD Foundation and on the OpenSSF governing board around open source security.
Absolutely. In addition to Deploy Hub, Aurelius, submitting a whole bunch of speaking proposals and a lot of other great things. Welcome. Next is she still our newest gang member, or has someone come in behind her already, Mike?
I think she's still the newest one
For
so
now.
far, but that may only be for a little while.
All right. She also is the editor for Techstrong AI, Gestalt IT, and really knows her AI stuff as well. And I'm still working on her name because it usually takes me 3 months to get people's names right. Sulagna, Saha. So say your last name.
Yes, it's Sulagna Saha.
Saha, right. Sulagna, welcome. It's good to see you.
Thank you. It's good to be on the show. It's balmy 24 degrees here in Ohio,
Woo.
which is by a long shot better than the sub-zero temperatures we had earlier this week.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it was 47 here today, so
Wow.
that makes me feel it doesn't really make me feel better. I still feel cold. But I'll talk more about that in a second. But let me introduce our last gang member for today, certainly not least. He's the Chief Content Officer here at Techstrong, and Mike Vizard. Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm well. I have a question for you and Chris. So, are you getting ready to put together a boat race for pinks? Are you gonna trade
for Regis, right? Boat race for Regis.
Yeah.
No, I was thinking we call it a regatta.
I was going to say, yes. Or a brigada, yes. Or a flotilla, yeah.
Or a
We're
small
gonna move.
flotilla. Or look, we could be a fleet. We're the AI fleet. We're about to take in about $500 billion in capital, and we're going to build out some capital ships here, and we'll go from that. But an interesting thing about the weather. So my car is supposed to be an intelligent car, and down here in Florida, we don't put the heat on. My car is set. Climate control. When I'm driving in today, all of a sudden I noticed the steering wheel started heating up. I started getting hot air blowing into my neck over here. The seat warmers went on. I didn't turn anything on. It just, it just figured out it was really cold out. You better do something for this guy. And I said, now that's AI. That is what we want out of this thing. I didn't ask for it, but I needed it and I got it. So kudos to BMW on their intelligent driving machines.
And that sounded like the story of the frog in the pot, right?
Pretty much. Anyway, all right, let's jump into things. Mike, we're going to run it over to you. Donald Trump's been in office about a week now. And hard to believe, no one's noticed any kind of controversial actions on any part. All of a sudden, now we've got one. What do we got, Mike?
So there's been some executive orders issued related to cybersecurity, and in particular, they seem to have replaced the people on the cybersecurity review board. It's not quite clear to me, at least, that they're getting rid of it or if they're just going to put some other folks on there yet. But some folks are saying this is just political business as usual, and other folks are all upset, saying that this is a signal that cybersecurity is being quote unquote politicized. Chris, I know you're closer to this than I am. What's going on here?
So, as you know, I've been spending the last half a decade or a little bit more focusing on supply chain, right? And I noticed in the Security Boulevard article, in the content back content for this show, that so that's called out, and it remains 14028. Now 14027 and 14029 are gone. And when 14028 came out, the SBOM executive order in May of 2021, I was working with Unisys, I think, at the time, and involved with CISA and the SBOM activities. It was Department of Commerce before that, actually. And I did a map across time, across presidential administrations. You look at supply chain executive orders, and across the Obama and Trump and Biden, at that point, Biden administrations, they lined up remarkably well, right? Different administrations may have different motivations. I think during the first Trump administration, it was more punitive, nationalistic. Let's, punish China, for example, and to grossly typify that. However, the executive orders about supply chain were not 90 degrees or 270 degrees from existing executive orders. So I can't help seeing all of this as the two executive orders, 14028 and the one that just came out recently that I had heard was going to survive the transition and has, as being more artifacts that show that a new administration, like a CEO in a huge company, can say, I want to do this. Then you turn to the people who actually work there and say, what is possible? So while we're dealing with decisions coming from this given source, we all familiar with, they're not really varying as far as you would think from the existing path down these, but in cybersecurity writ large and supply chain security. So I'm relatively okay with things to date. We'll have to watch this day to day and quarter to quarter, make sure it's guided properly in the efforts to date, continue and move forward. But no panic yet.
I raised my hand. I'm trying to be a rule follower over the next 4 years. I don't want to find myself in a deportation camp or anything. So I've got a few problems with this on a few different levels. And Chris, I appreciate your myopic view of focusing in on just how this is going to relate to supply chain security. But I think there are bigger issues here. First of all, as a political science major, it kind of makes me sick to my stomach to see this current state of the American government. And I'm not going to just blame Donald Trump and the Trump administration. This has been going on, quite frankly, since the Obama administration. We've substituted democracy for executive orders. Our Constitution is pretty clear about what roles the three branches play. And all of a sudden, because of the lack of political will, the inability to compromise, the inability to reason and come to decisions the way this country has been governed for 200 plus years, we've substituted that with these EOs, which I really think the Supreme Court will continue. That we can't have an imperial presidency. I don't care who the president is. EOs need to be limited in what they can do, because it should be the will of the people. It should be the Congress, the legislature who is okaying these things. That's their job. And by them abdicating in their inability to get their act together, we've tossed it into the executive branch and made an imperial presidency. It's wrong, and it's going to wind up as a bad thing for the American people. So that, at a very high level, that's that. Secondly, as it relates to cybersecurity in general, yes, they kept some of these in here. There are plenty of books on the law that they haven't rescinded either. That doesn't mean they're going to enforce them. That just means they're there. Now, the fact of the matter is, I think over the last 5-6 years, going back to the first Trump administration even, right? Chris, who was in charge of CISA? Chris, he spoke for us at ours. Chris Krebs. From Chris Krebs and those folks through the Biden administration, for the first time in a long time, I really felt the federal government understood how to handle on cyber and what the challenges were and how government, because government can't do it alone, how government could work with private industry to make a difference. And I felt like we were making progress, even though they were mostly executive orders coming out of the Biden administration. I wasn't a fan of it then as an EO. I'd rather see Congress act. At least I was hearing the right things. I thought the right people were involved. A week or two ago, we were on here and we were talking about the loss of Amit Uran, right? Amit Uran from Tenable at 54 years old. And what a shame it was. When you look at Amit's career, he scaled great heights in private industry and cybersecurity, NetWitness, RSA, Tenable, right? But really, some of his best work was, and he worked for the Bush administration, setting up what really in many ways was the precursors to CISA and a lot of our cybersecurity government infrastructure. It was done not in a politicized way. We didn't throw out the old review board or there are people who are experts. This should not be politicized, and I appreciate them not rescinding things. Doesn't mean they're going to enforce them, but there are people there doing a good job. And until you show me that they're going to bring people on to do a good job and not turn the whole world from Twitter into X, call me Doubting Thomas.
Alan,
Well,
it seems like we've entered this era. And not just Trump, but all of us have thought about, well, whatever politicians say in the campaigns, we know they can't do most of that, right? That they don't have the right Congress in place, or they may not, or who knows if they can actually legally do that. And while those things still may be true, the approach now is, I'm just going to put it all out there. And we'll see what is legal as it goes through. We'll see what people let go by. But it's a way of promises made, promises kept. Doesn't matter whether it actually happened. I initiated an action in a part a lot of what's happening is just kind of introducing the chaos of we're going to change all this. We're getting rid of that. Who knows whether we can or not. So it's this huge. You remember the pickup sticks game where you kind of tossed them all down and then you had to kind of figure out how to pick them up without disrupting the whole pile. Well, we're just disrupting the pile while we're picking them up too, and yeah, on purpose. And that's the purpose, is to just shake it up constantly. And it's interesting because where will we end up with all this? Whether it's the cybersecurity rules or doing Stargate, whatever it might be. I'm just curious where we're going to end up with. So once we see what reality really is, it may take years to find out if that could happen. Meantime, they've taken some actions that may have not been allowed, and do they get retrenched or just ignored or what? It's really unsettling.
Well, I feel like it's frustrating for me because when I look at something like this, I think of a book called The Logic of Failure. Making decisions and not walking them all the way down as far as you can to see where they're going to take you. If we look at this one, and the one that was thrown out was in particular around AI. Now, if we look right now at how government writes software, they use open source, and they probably will use open source LLMs. Why? Because it would take them years and years and years to write all of the open source and LLMs internally and own that IP themselves. It doesn't happen. So what we end up with then is basically, if we think of Trump being a CEO of the DoD and the DOE for software development, we have somebody who has said, we don't need to regulate AI. We don't need to look at this. We're going to let OpenAI and we're going to let Meta and we're going to let these companies define the processes themselves, which may not be as important as it should be for something like weapons systems. And I can promise you that the software engineers at the Army writing their weapons systems, they're not trying to write all of this themselves. So the U.S. government depends heavily on open source and COTS and companies like OpenAI and Meta to develop the software that we rely on. And we have a CEO that has said, let's make it a Wild West. We don't care. But they only see it from the perspective of, we don't want to hinder the growth and the development of AI, which I understand. But it's sort of like when DevOps started hitting the market and everybody started doing it, they were like, oh, this is going to be too expensive and too time consuming. And then they realized it was the one thing that got their software out the door faster. So if we take the logic of failure and we walk down this path, what we're seeing is actually we're shooting ourselves in the foot by not regulating and not clearly stating what we need from these companies in terms of protections around this very new technology.
Chris?
Yeah. So, I'm trying to think of an analogy here. I'm going to use climate and weather, right? The last 3 years I've been building and selling these boats up and down the coast. I have 60 years experience with Florida. And in the last 3 years, I've both seen myself and spent a lot of time with people who live their entire lives right here, can tell you the differences. I can see it. The climate has changed. But weather is what you deal with every day, right? And you have to worry about both at the same time. And, since we're all sort of talking about weather, I'll try to talk about climate a little more. And just as, these conditions going on, Alan, right now, this is unusual Florida January weather. This is not typical, but it is what it is. And I've managed to use those conditions to move the vessels, achieve goals, and keep things going. And I don't see that ending. I don't think we're likely to end up in these, desert Earth, climate disaster. I think we have a lot of challenges. It's going to be a mess generations after us. I feel for them, but I think we'll figure it out. Similar to this, right? I'm not overwhelmingly happy with the current conditions in this space. However, I think that there's opportunities even in this to get some things done. As you said, Alan, I've worked with the Beltway an awful lot. I respect everybody who works there, but it's got its own problems. I work with big corporations, respect those folks too. They have their big own problems. Sometimes when it rams into a wall, you put it back together differently. So there's a certain flavor of that to this, that will create a lot of bad weather, I think. but I think we can navigate through it. And 5, 10, 15 years now, we may say, that train wreck actually helped us change the way we were doing things somehow in positive ways.
So that's let's burn it to the ground and we'll start and hope it comes back better. Okay.
But it's not that, again, it
That's
isn't that bad.
that's an interesting philosophy.
No,
a lot of people get hurt when they burn it to the ground, Chris.
Oh yeah, storms, kill people all the time. But again, we're talking presidential policies and so forth, and the Beltway. And I've seen 30 years everything develop: the National Infrastructure Protection Plan, the sector coordinated councils, the information sharing systems around that. They're not really going anywhere, right? Those are good things that are going in the right direction, right? But the program that Phil Engler of the Healthcare ISAC and I have been running in partnership with CISA is now starting to propagate through the information sharing community, whether or not, Washington does anything. So we always have to be ready for these big powers like the U.S. federal government to be fickle and transitory and build the things we're building into everything. So it's not dependent on one massive, powerful organization to fix everything or screw it up.
All right.
So-
Yeah, absolutely.
Sulagna, go ahead.
Yeah, so I too agree with that. But I'm glad that the executive orders that Biden put in place, some of them, the supply chain, for example, those are still untouched, and hopefully we're moving in the right direction. Where I'm slightly concerned about is the rollback things that are happening with companies going back, Meta, for example, and also the hiring freeze that's happening across agencies, because that is going to impact the staffing, and as a result, probably it will halt the investigation that's going on with the hacking incidents that's been happening lately. And also, Kristi Noem said to DHS that if she's confirmed, then she's going to keep the department out of the efforts of combating disinformation and misinformation. And that is kind of like I don't know, I'm not sure about that. I don't know how that is going to pan out, especially with companies already seeing that they have a free reign to go back and self police. And that is definitely, and mostly they just make it look like they're promoting free speech and stuff like that, but this can go in a very wrong direction unless guardrails are put in place again.
I'm going to give you a little bit of Nebraska logic here, experience. Well, I didn't live on a farm, lived around farms. And when you plow over fill, you turn it over, the first thing that comes up was weeds. That's the first plant to rise out of the ground because it's the most hardy and growing. So when you burn things to the ground, you better be planting what you want to come up, because something's going to arise. It's kind of like culture. Whether you intentionally derive what you want to have a culture. It's you get things that are going to come up. So I think that, to me, what I don't agree with about the just burn it all down and let's see what comes back is you're going to get a lot of crap. You're going to get a lot of stuff that shouldn't be there
Lot of
either,
weeds.
and it may be worse.
That was heartland knowledge, homespun. I love that, man.
Good old Nebraska boy.
Give us
I wanna
more
be
about
careful with the
Nebraska,
analogies, though.
Mitch.
I want to get to Tracy for a second here, though. So will the industry respond and fill this void? Can we do that, or is it just going to be chaos?
I think that the European Union will begin to be where we look to for the guardrails around AI in particular. I believe that we will go through a phase of chaos if there's not clear guidance from the federal government, and I don't think it's a train that's going as fast as it possibly can. If you look at the amount of money that's going into things like Space Force, which is Trump's baby, he created Space Force, and all of think about all the startups that are trying to push AI technology and satellites. Just in that alone, they are going to be consuming the open source LLMs and the open source supply chain that Trump has said we don't need to regulate. So it is a big risk. This is a big risk. But I want to point out that Trump likes to, he's a hot topics guy. He goes into the Hot Topic store and he pulls off the shelf all the things that people are really talking about. And that's why if he had said, we're going to disband the S-bomb regulation, who would care? Nobody, none of his voters really understand what an S-bomb is. But boy, AI is either something really cool that Elon Musk is doing, and that's the stuff he's going to focus on.
Hey, when
Because
the
he's a hot
National
topic guy.
Enquirer is the newspaper of record for your country, that says something.
Yes.
Guys, we got to take a break though. We're 25 minutes in here. I got to jump to the next segment. Obviously, we'll be revisiting this, I have a feeling, over the days, weeks, and months ahead. God help us. You're watching Techstrong, gang.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, folks, we're back, and our next story is also cybersecurity related, but the federal government is now issuing sanctions directly against certain cyber criminals that are out there, or at least alleged cyber criminals. And we've been issuing sanctions for a long time. And Alan, I know you are a resident legal, but is this going to be an effective way to combat cyber criminals? Does this actually disturb them, or are they just kind of going to look at it and go, wow, thanks for the notoriety?
Look what a great job sanctions have done in shutting down the Russian economy. Right? You want to talk about paper tigers. Look what a great job, I mean, here's the problem with the sanctions. After a while, you become like the boy who cried wolf, right? So what gives the bite to our sanctions to make people for people to say who gives a flying whatever, right? It's because generally the world works on the dollar, and generally the world works through the US banking system. So when we put sanctions into place, that's the teeth of the tiger, right? You can't trade in dollars and you can't go into our banking system, which controls the world. But the problem is, the more we do with sanctions and do that, the more other parts of the world say, we got to get off the dollar. We can't be held hostage where the US is the sole judge of who's sanctioned or not. And so you get things like this whole BRIC alliance, right? Brazil, Russia, India, China, and everyone else who's joined it. And make no mistake, this isn't the Warsaw Pact taking on NATO when we were younger. This is a organized attempt to get out from US dominance of the financial sector, to get off the dollar, to get away from the US banking system, so that any sanctions we put in, whether it's against an individual, an oligarch in Russia, or a Chinese cybersecurity hacker, or the PLA itself, and their hacking divisions, they will decrease in effectiveness the more we use them. So my advice is use them judiciously. Use them where it makes sense, where it's going to do something. Sanctioning some Chinese individual who's a hacker, and I'm not saying they're not, and I'm not saying we shouldn't do things. I think there are other things to do besides sanctions. I think there's a time and a place for offensive security operations that we don't need to publicize, and you go do that kind of thing. But to just throw sanctions up to show you did something just weakens our whole ability to have these sanctions have any kind of teeth. And so my long answer, Mike, no, they don't
Right.
make a difference.
So in some ways, so this could be just an elaborate plot to get us to standardize on the Trump crypto coin instead of the dollar, right? Is that where the
I don't know if he's capable of elaborate. He doesn't do elaborate well. Like Tracy says, he's more of a National Enquirer
That
kind
he's
of
either
guy.
playing three-dimensional chess or checkers, one or the other, which is
one or the other? So, Chris, is there an effective mechanism for punishing individuals who commit these crimes that live in other countries and places that we can't reach, and frankly may not care if they can't get access to a dollar?
Yes, and since this is a tech show, I've queued up in my head an example from the CISA working group, that we're working on right now. So ISACs, Information Sharing Analysis Centers, are these brokers of sensitive information between public and private sector partners, and there's a whole bunch of them, dozens and dozens these days. And CERTS, first.org, is hundreds and hundreds of cyber emergency response teams to do similar things. And what we've done in the CISA working group is develop a process to help organizations like this develop a control architecture, is what we're talking about here. A control architecture allows you to put some structure around what your defenses are. And in the SBOM sharing space, we have a couple artifacts of definition we're dealing with: the discovery, access, or transport, 3 different things of an SBOM, of a software bill of material. And each of those, as a different actor, you have different considerations, right? So we find organizations saying, I don't know what to do with this, but you walk through it and you say, all right, what I want is to hold the directory or hold the repository, or have these, and therefore I put these controls around that. So this, we're zooming all the way back, to seeing the Earth from orbit. Yeah, sanction the world? No, that's not actually one of those. Intelligently sometimes sanction. Look, I was a Ragan Republican, as in my early, free market person in my early political life. I don't like sanctions, but sometimes you have to say, you're not playing fair, do your thing. But to your point, Alan, if you just say that all the time, then in the words of the great American philosopher Bruce Springsteen, right, you end up like a dog that's been beat too much, right? Spend half your time just covering up. So yeah, it loses all its effectiveness if it's just a spam approach. That's not a control architecture, that's a grenade.
Yeah.
And we have to acknowledge where we are in the world right now. Our, as Alan pointed out, our sanctions don't really have that. They don't really have teeth anymore. Do people really? Does an individual really care? I don't believe they do. I don't believe that person's
but
rushing
to be,
get into the
but
US.
Tracy, if you were a U.S. citizen or a Western European or European citizen, perhaps they would care, even maybe someone in the Middle East. But if you're in China,
You're in China, why would you care? So, I mean, so we have to, I think we have to, and the government's not good at pivoting. We all know that. And maybe to Chris's point, this is trying to be a pivot. But I think we have to look at what other tools that we can use as opposed to just sanctions. We have to broaden our scope. Maybe we can build a fortress around them so they can, that particular company, any of their servers are blocked in. That would be a problem. There's got to be other ways to do this. There's got to be more, covert ways of solving this problem as opposed to just sanctions. And, sanctions is a tool. Go ahead and slap them on that person or that company. But is it really going to impact them? It just depends on who they are, as you point out.
So to that point, just to take it to your previous comment about the ultimate logic flow, do we need to punish the institutions that allow these individuals to transact in other currencies? And, if you're going to have a sanction, how far do you go with the enforcement thereof, right? Because there are banks in those countries that are letting these guys, for lack of a better phrase, deposit ill-gotten gains. So how far do you go with that sanction? Or can you?
I just think that it's sort of like squeezing the balloon, right? And something's going to pop out somewhere. There's no way to really contain it. And if there's anything we've learned over the last 10 years, where, sanctions, wherever we've used them, is they only work to a point, and we're only willing to go to a certain point of how far to enforce them. You could do something draconian that might be more effective, but it also might be intolerable. So I just think we put too much reliance on sanctions. They're more, oftentimes they're just political to send a message. The routes around it, whether, getting whatever goods, AI chips through other paths that shouldn't be going into a certain country. There's black markets. There's always ways people find things, ways to get what they want or to make money. And so I think it's futile to think solves our problem. It's only a small part of what we would do.
Yeah, we have a shield and a sword, and right now the sanctions sword is a little tiny knife.
It's a dagger.
And we need to figure out the shield. It's a dagger at best. We need a butter knife maybe, but we need to figure out better shields. And this goes back to the previous conversation: is what when we start taking down regulations around tools that are going to be used by so many different companies and in so many different areas of expertise, like weapons, we're going to open up ourselves for more of these. And the shield is better right now than the sword or the butter knife, as we're calling it.
All I heard is do something draconian, and the picture of Donald Trump just popped into my head, right? I mean,
Word
Okay,
association.
Let's end it right there. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back. We've got another block to go over here about Bitbucket, lessons learned, as if we haven't learned any lessons yet. You're watching Techstrong, gang.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.
all right, folks, we're back, and there was yet another outage, this time involving Bitbucket and their CI/CD platform that's managed by Atlassian out of the cloud. And I feel like, I don't really want to call out Atlassian and Bitbucket just specifically for this, because what I'm trying to drive at here is it seems like these outages are happening more often, or are we just more aware of them? Tracy, we moved everything in the cloud, and now it seems like maybe it's not as robust and as reliable as we imagined.
Yes, I feel for all of those folks who had to suffer the outage on the 21st, because when last time GitHub had a similar problem, I can promise you I stormed around the office with my hands on my hips, and I was so frustrated because I was trying to get some code out the door, and it can be extremely frustrating. And, we don't think about, at least we at Deploy Hub, we don't necessarily think about building redundant systems to GitHub, and certainly not to Bitbucket. So as DevOps engineers, we are very reliant on these cloud-based tools, especially version control. And, in all of our work that we're doing now, I think, no, it's still there. In all the work we're doing now in DevOps, we're talking more and more about pushing DevOps up to the cloud. Salsa says, have a distributed build system, don't have them local. Push everything up so it's not local and it can be better controlled. So when these systems go down, it literally stops development. It stops us in our tracks. And I don't think we have a good alternative. I really don't. Building these redundant systems where you could switch over from the cloud to something local isn't simple. It's extremely difficult because of the fact that we're updating it so often. Now, I'm always kind of poo-pooing AI and DevOps, but not so much in platform engineering, right? So I feel like this problem, I believe it had to do with a database being full or something of that sort, could possibly have been caught and stopped using AI in platform engineering. So I think what we have to do as consumers start pushing back on the people who are telling us we're going to pay us the money. We will support you. You don't have to worry about it. And when it comes down, we need to push back. They should be doing a better job. Now, there are companies I know that have their local versions of Git. They have everything local and they're not impacted by it. And I think if you're a big company, you probably want to go down that road. But for the smaller companies, we're talking, 500 million and less, we're going to rely on those cloud providers to keep us healthy. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how AI can help predict potential failures so that platform engineers can fix it before it does fail.
It's a trade-off, right? Maybe you wouldn't be able to do all those things for yourself that a provider like, Bitbucket or whatever service, or setting that up and maintaining it. And while it's painful when an outage happens, one outage, okay, I get that happens. And, certainly they're a quality organization like Atlassian is going to take measures to figure out not only how do they avoid that database overflow condition to be able to scale it further. You learn from those lessons. That's what your SREs are also, focused on in platform engineering. But I also look at it as, if you had to run all that yourself, you may not have all those services. So are you trading off, I can get a lot more done or do many more things because I'm using a service in the cloud than I could have myself? Or, do I go with less and do my own thing, which also comes with my own maintenance and all of the other things to it. So, I feel for the providers, when I'm the one affected, like you talked about, Tracy, you march around the room, and I think what they should do when there's an outage, they should do the same thing like they do in a sports event. When the signal feed gets cut off to the Steelers game, they switch over to the Patriots game. I'm just kidding.
And I love when they do that because I'd much rather not watch my Steelers. But
and you're right, Mitch. We, as a small company, we couldn't do it.
no,
We couldn't do everything
that's
we
the
do.
point. That was the
Yeah.
whole point behind the cloud.
Right.
Atlassian is going to do a much better job of hosting Bitbucket than you ever will.
Way better.
AWS, Google, and Microsoft are going to do a much better job, and they have many more resources to pour in to building an infrastructure to host your applications and securing your applications and doing everything they do. But here's the underlying truth that all of us live by, and we don't acknowledge it. We're all just zebras in the herd, and one day the lion comes for you. That's it. All right, I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to wrap us up here. We got it in on
There are
time.
no zebras in
Techstrong
Nebraska,
gang.
but okay.
Well, there might be zebras.
The
in
lions.
Nebraska. But anyway, happy Monday, everyone. We've got a great lineup of Techstrong TV behind us, so stay tuned for that. We'll be back tomorrow with a lot more Techstrong gang. And until then, this is Alan Schimmel on behalf of our gang here today. Have a great day. We're out.